The phone buzzed in my purse just as the first shovel of wet dirt hit Arthur's casket. It wasn't the grief that brought me to my knees that day. It was the voice on the other end of the line, a voice that belonged to a dead man. "Don't open the box," he whispered. And just like that, the nightmare began. On the day of my husband's funeral, it rained like the sky was trying to wash the whole world away. The clouds seemed to be mourning in their own right, and every drop that hammered against the mahogany coffin sounded like the earth itself was weeping right along with us. While everyone else was tossing roses, all I could do was stare at that wooden box and think that half of my life was locked inside it, gone forever. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of routines, of silences, of love, and of wounds that nobody else knew about. But the strangest thing wasn't the heavy silence of the cemetery. It was the phone ringing in my purse at the exact moment the priest murmured the final words. "Into your hands, Lord. We commend his spirit." I pulled out my cell, confused. It was an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered it. I really shouldn't have. And yet, I did. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling. On the other end, a deep voice, barely a whisper, repeated the exact last phrase my husband had said to me before he died. "Don't open the box, please." I felt the blood drain from my entire body. "Who is this?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was a pause, then the same voice, lower, slower. "I'll see you tomorrow, Diane." And the call cut off. I stood there frozen, surrounded by mourners, but completely alone. Nobody seemed to have noticed my pale face, my shaking hands, or the phone still pressed to my ear. All I could hear was the echo of that phrase bouncing around inside my skull. "I'll see you tomorrow." That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound in the house felt like an omen. The ticking of the grandfather clock, the settling of the floorboards, the wind rattling the window panes. Everything reminded me of his voice. The voice of Arthur, my husband, who had been dead for 2 days. You know, they say grief plays tricks on the mind. It makes you see things that aren't there, hear things you want to hear. But this wasn't grief. This was something colder, something that sat in the pit of my stomach like a stone. There was no rational way to explain what had happened, and yet I had heard it. It was him. I knew him too well to doubt it. "Don't open the box." What box? What was he talking about? Throughout his life, Arthur had been a reserved man, almost hermetic. He had his private den, a small home office where he kept documents, books, and an old metal lockbox that he never let me open. He always said they were work things, and I, out of habit or maybe fear, never pushed it. But before we continue, I have a special request for you. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps me see that you support me and enjoy these stories. And tell me down below in the comments, what city are you watching from? Now let's get back to it. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, as if the sky was undecided between crying again or staying silent. I started a pot of coffee, trying to claw back some sense of normalcy. The gurgling sound of the machine was calming. Until the phone rang again. The same number. Again. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. When I finally worked up the courage to look at the screen, there was a message. "See you soon." The voice was the same. Arthur. There was no doubt. I sank into the armchair and replayed the last few days before his death. Everything had happened so fast. A typical Tuesday morning. He went out to the garden, stopped suddenly, and collapsed. The doctor said it was a massive heart attack. He didn't even have time to say my name. Or so I thought, until that call. I turned on the desk lamp in his den and rummaged through the drawers. There it was. The box, a metal lockbox, cold, heavy. On the lid, his initials were engraved, AK. I tried to open it, but it was locked. And just at that moment, something fell behind me. I spun around. A picture frame, our wedding photo, had slid off the shelf. The glass shattered, and among the shards, something glinted. A small gold key. I picked it up with trembling hands. Could it be? I brought it close to the lock. It fit perfectly, but I didn't turn it. Something inside me told me I wasn't supposed to do it yet. I went out to the garden to breathe. The damp air smelled of wet earth and memories. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. Then I heard the front gate. A soft knock. Then 2. Then 3. Someone was out there. I approached slowly. My heart was thumping in my ears. When I peeked through the peephole, I saw no one. Just a letter, carefully placed on the welcome mat. I picked it up. The envelope was soaked, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in blue ink. Do not trust him. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Just that phrase. I ran up to the bedroom. The fear had turned into something else. A certainty I didn't want to accept. Someone knew things I didn't. And that person didn't want me to open the box. Or maybe they wanted me to do it, but in their own time. That night, I dreamed of Arthur again. He was standing at the end of the hallway, wearing the same suit from the funeral. He looked at me with a blank expression, but his lips were moving, as if trying to tell me something. I moved toward him, but every step I took pushed him further away, until I only heard his voice whispering from the darkness. Don't open the box. Not yet. I woke up soaked in sweat, with the phone vibrating on the nightstand. The same number. Again. This time I didn't answer. I turned the phone off. But just before the screen went black, I caught a glimpse of something that froze my blood. A photo of me, taken from outside the house. That very night. I slept with all the lights on. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Soft, slow knocks. 3 times. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and when I opened it, my body went ice cold. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I never expected to see like this. Someone who, one way or another, knew everything that had happened. And that was the moment I understood that the real mystery hadn't started with the phone call, but long before. All morning, I couldn't shake the image of the person standing at the door. It was my son, Lucas. The same son who, since the funeral, had barely spoken a word to me. His eyes were red. He had the stubble on his face, and there was a strange vibe about him. I couldn't tell if it was exhaustion or guilt. Can we talk, Mom? He said, avoiding eye contact. Of course. Come in. He walked in silently, hands in his pockets, like he was afraid of leaving footprints on the floor. We sat in the dining room. The grandfather clock chimed 10, and every tick-tock seemed to push the heavy air between us. I didn't sleep last night, he mumbled. Me neither. Did you get a call? He asked suddenly. My heart stopped for a second. Why do you say that? I don't know. I dreamed about Dad last night. Was it that real? I looked at him in silence. I wanted to tell him, but something inside stopped me. There was something in his look I didn't recognize. Coldness, distance, a shadow. You think you know your children. You change their diapers. You bandage their scraped knees. You watch them grow into men. But looking at Lucas then, I realized I was looking at a stranger wearing my son's face. While he talked, my mind drifted back to the day of the accident. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen brewing coffee. Arthur went out to the garden, like always, to check on his plants. Suddenly, I heard a dull thud. I ran. He was on the ground, hand clutching his chest, eyes wide open. I tried to revive him. I screamed for help. Lucas arrived minutes later, pale, phone in hand, but it was too late. The doctor said it was a massive cardiac arrest. I accepted it. I had no reason to doubt. Until now. Lucas kept talking, but I was barely listening. When he got up to leave, he hugged me awkwardly, and I could feel his rapid breathing. Try to rest, Mom. I'll handle everything, he said, and walked out without looking back. The house fell silent, a dense, uncomfortable silence, full of questions. I went up to Arthur's den. The air in there smelled of old wood, paper, and something else. Something I couldn't identify. The metal box was still on the desk, and next to it, a folder of documents. I opened it. There were bills, bank statements, insurance papers, and a folded letter with my name on the front. I recognized it immediately. It was his handwriting. My breathing became jagged. I sat down and started to read. Diane, if you are reading this, it is because I am gone. Forgive me. I was never the man you thought I was, but I didn't have the courage to tell you the truth while I was still breathing. Don't open the box yet, and if something happens to me, do not trust our son. The paper slipped from my hands. I felt dizzy, a sharp pain in my chest. Not trust Lucas? My own son? The boy I raised practically alone while Arthur worked? The one who used to sit on my lap and tell me his dreams? I refused to believe it, and yet every word sounded sincere. Too sincere. I went down to the living room and searched through Arthur's things with desperation. I found receipts for accounts I didn't know existed. Transfers to a woman named Valerie Cross. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. The amount of the payments was high, consistent, monthly. Who was this woman? And why was he sending her money? While I was shuffling through the papers, the phone rang. The same unknown number. Again. This time I answered. Who is this? I asked, my voice firm. Diane, whispered a voice. Don't tell Lucas you know about the letter. Who is speaking? Do what I say, or you'll end up like him. The call cut off. I stood there paralyzed. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't male or female. It was distorted, like it was coming from very far away. I looked out the window and thought I saw a figure in the trees, but when I blinked, it was gone. I decided to do something Arthur never allowed me to do. Open his old filing cabinet. Inside, hidden between folders, I found an envelope sealed with red tape. The label said, "Only if she insists." I couldn't resist. I opened it. Inside was an old photograph. Arthur and Lucas, standing in front of a building, but behind them, a dark-haired woman was looking at the camera, the same face from the photo that appeared under my door the day before, the same woman who, according to the papers, was named Valerie Cross. On the back of the photo, a date, March 17th, 1997, and a sentence written in blue ink. The truth always finds a way. That night, it was hard to breathe. Every corner of the house threw a different memory back at me. The kitchen where he hugged me from behind while I cooked, the armchair where he napped on Sundays, the garden where he died. But now everything had a different meaning. Who had Arthur really been, and why, in his last letter, did he ask me to mistrust our son? I went up to the bedroom. On the nightstand, the phone was still there, turned off since the night before. I turned it on. 3 missed calls from the same number, and a new voicemail. I took a deep breath and played it. Don't ignore the signs, Diane. He didn't die of a heart attack, and you are next. The phone dropped from my hands. The message ended with static noise and then a whisper. See you soon. I ran to lock every door and window. I turned on every light in the house, but no matter how much I tried to convince myself it was a sick prank, something inside me knew. This wasn't a coincidence. I went to the den one more time. I touched the metal box. The gold key was still hanging from the drawer. I held it between my fingers and thought of Arthur, of his last words, of that warning I could no longer ignore. Don't open the box. What if the truth it hid was worse than the fear I was feeling? I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, eyes sunken, but something in my gaze had changed. I was no longer the weak woman weeping at funerals. I was a betrayed wife, a confused mother, a woman who needed answers. And I was willing to find them, even if it cost me my life. Trust is a funny thing. It takes a lifetime to build, brick by brick, but only a second to shatter. Standing there, I realized my entire marriage had been built on a foundation of sand, and the tide was finally coming in. I never imagined silence could be so loud. Since that call, every corner of my house seemed to speak a different language. The clock didn't mark time anymore. It marked absence. The air had a different weight, and I felt like someone was watching me. I spent the entire day organizing Arthur's papers, trying to distract myself. But there was no way to ignore the signs. Every time I closed a drawer, another one opened by itself. Every time I turned off a light, another one turned on. I thought maybe my mind, worn down by grief, was playing tricks on me. But fear That gut feeling deep in your stomach is never wrong. That night, I decided to listen to the voicemails again. Every word sounded more distorted than the last, as if the voice was coming from a place too far away. Or too close. I repeated the last one over and over. Don't ignore the signs, Diane. He didn't die of a heart attack, and you are next. The phrase repeated in my head until sleep overcame me, sitting right there in the armchair. I was woken by a noise, 3 sharp knocks coming from the hallway. I grabbed the flashlight. The floorboards creaked under my steps. When I got to the hallway mirror, I noticed something strange, a shadow behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was still there. Dawn arrived without me getting any more sleep. I went out to the garden, looking for air. Dew covered Arthur's flowers, the ones he tended to every morning. I touched the leaves, and for an instant, I swore I felt his touch. It was so real, I recoiled. I couldn't go on like this. I had to do something. I had to understand what was happening. I decided to visit Dr. Benson, my neighbor and old friend. She had been the one to sign Arthur's death certificate. Seeing me, she hugged me tenderly. Diane, honey, it's so good to see you out of the house. How are you? I don't know, Laura. That's what I came to find out. We sat in her office. I told her about the calls, the messages, Arthur's letter. She listened in silence, eyes narrowed. When I finished, she stood up and pulled a file from the cabinet. Look at this. She showed me the medical report. The diagnosis said acute myocardial infarction. But what froze my blood was a note written in the margin, in her handwriting, traces of unidentified substance in blood panel. What does that mean? I asked, my voice breaking. Laura sighed. I didn't know at the time. I thought it was a lab error, but now I'm not so sure. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Do you think someone poisoned him? She hesitated a second before answering. I can't say for sure, but it wasn't a normal heart attack, Diane. I sat in silence. I remembered the transfers to Valerie Cross, the words in the letter, the warnings. It all fit together too well, or too horribly. Back home, I noticed something that paralyzed me. The door to the den was ajar. I had locked it before leaving. I entered slowly. The air smelled different, like men's cologne and rust. And on the desk, where the metal box had always been, it was gone. I ran through the whole house searching. Nothing. Not a trace. Just an envelope on top of the armchair. My name, written in blue ink. And inside, a photo. It was the same image of Arthur and Valerie Cross, but now there was something new. Behind them, in the background, a blurry figure. Me, in my white dress from 1997, the same year as the date. But I didn't remember being there. I didn't remember being at that place, nor having seen that woman. Night fell early. It was raining hard, and lightning illuminated the hallways like the sky was trying to show me something. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked out the window. A silhouette stood motionless at the gate. I grabbed the flashlight and went down. The wind battered the doors. The thunder sounded like distant growls. When I opened the door, there was no one. Just a package wrapped in brown paper, soaked by the rain. I took it to the dining room, dried it off, and opened it carefully. Inside was an old cassette tape and a note. He wanted you to know the truth. I ran to the attic, where I still kept Arthur's old player. I plugged it in. The sound was dirty, full of static, but the voice was clear. It was his. Diane, if you're listening to this, it's because I didn't survive. I know it will seem impossible to you, but there is someone else. Lucas knows. And Valerie never disappeared. She is closer than you imagine. The tape ended abruptly with a loud noise like a sharp blow. I covered my face with my hands. It was too much. Arthur spoke with fear, with guilt, and worst of all, he mentioned Lucas, our son, as if he were part of the secret. That night, at 3 a.m, I woke to a metallic sound, coming from the basement. My heart hammered. I took the flashlight and went down the stairs one by one. The air was colder, thicker, And there, on the workbench, was the metal box, the same one that had disappeared. Only now it was open. Inside there were no papers or documents, just a gold fountain pen and a small note written in Arthur's handwriting. "Don't fear the truth. Fear those who hide it." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the armchair, the box in my lap, watching the shadows move on the walls. I knew that whatever was happening wasn't a game, nor a coincidence. There was something bigger, darker, tangled between my husband's death, my son, and this woman, Valerie. And then, as dawn was just breaking, the phone rang. The same number. I answered. "Who are you?" I screamed. Silence. Then the same voice as always, whispering, "You aren't alone, Diane, but soon you will be." The line went dead. And in that instant, the living room mirror cracked on its own. Dawn arrived gray and heavy, as if the sun didn't dare look at my house. I hadn't slept. The crack in the mirror was still there, a scar in the glass that seemed to breathe with me. The phone didn't ring again, but the silence was worse. A silence that weighed, that pulsed, that watched me. I made coffee, even though my stomach hurt. The aroma, which used to be a comfort, now turned my stomach. I looked at the empty chair where Arthur used to read the paper every morning. For an instant, I swear I saw his shadow move. Just a flicker, but enough to freeze me. I gripped the mug with both hands, trying to calm the shaking. And then I heard 3 knocks on the door. Not loud, soft, precise, the same as the day before. My stomach flipped. I walked slowly to the entryway. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice cracking. Silence. Just the wind, dragging leaves across the porch. When I opened the door, the air left my lungs. A man stood there, soaked by the drizzle, staring at me. He wasn't more than 40. Dark hair, beard perfectly trimmed, eyes the exact same shade as Arthur's. Too similar. "Good morning, Mrs. Keegan," he said, his voice deep, deliberate. "Who are you?" "Caleb. I was a friend of your husband. I heard about his death and I needed to see you." His gaze was so familiar, I had to look away. He had the same mannerisms, the same way of narrowing his eyelids that Arthur had when he was lying. "Friend?" I asked, feigning calm. "I don't recall him mentioning that name." He smiled faintly. "I'm not surprised. He didn't talk much about me." I invited him in, although something inside me screamed that I shouldn't. But fear and curiosity mixed together, and before I could react, we were in the living room. He sat across from me, observing everything. He seemed to know the house. His gaze stopped on the wedding portrait on the mantel. "That photo? That was in May, right?" he asked. "Yes." "How do you know?" "Arthur showed it to me once. Said it was the happiest day of his life." I didn't know whether to believe him. His tone was too natural, like someone talking about their own memories. "Where did you know my husband from?" I asked. "From his past? From work? Let's say, from before you." The phrase went through me like a knife. Before me. There were too many things about Arthur I didn't know, but hearing it from a stranger made me feel exposed. Caleb leaned toward me. "I know you're getting calls." I froze. "How do you know that?" "Because I got them too. The voice, the same one. The same phrases." "What do you mean?" "That what's happening didn't end with your husband's death." For an instant, the room seemed to darken. The air turned colder. An invisible current swept through the room, moving the curtains. Caleb didn't flinch. He kept looking at me with that unsettling calm only people who know more than they're saying possess. "Why did you come here?" I asked, trembling. "Because you are in danger." "From who?" "From the same person who killed Arthur." My hands started to sweat. I couldn't process it. "Are you saying he was murdered?" "I'm not saying it. He said it." He pulled something from his coat pocket. A small, old tape recorder. He placed it on the table and pressed play. The voice that came out was unmistakable. "Arthur, Caleb, if something happens to me, take care of Diane. She doesn't know anything. Don't judge her, but tell her not to trust Lucas." A whimper escaped me. The same warning. The same words that were in the letter. "Why did you have that recording?" I whispered. "Because he gave it to me in person, 2 days before he died." And why didn't you say anything before? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. That phrase hurt. And now you can? I don't know yet. His gaze softened. But I came because you deserve to know the truth. Suddenly, the landline rang in the other room. Both of us went still. The sound cut the air like a blade. Caleb stood up. Don't answer. Why? Because it's not for you. The ringing persisted, sharper every time. I ran to the hallway, ignoring his warning. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence. And then the same whispering voice. Don't let him in. I looked toward the living room. Caleb was standing next to Arthur's portrait, looking at it with a strange expression, almost nostalgic. When I looked back at the receiver, the line was already dead. I hung up slowly. My hands were shaking. I went back to the living room, trying to maintain composure. Caleb turned to me. Who was it? Nobody. I lied, but he knew. And without saying anything else, he walked over to the hallway mirror, which still had the crack. This is where it happened, he murmured. What did you say? This is where it all started. What does that mean? I asked. He touched the glass with the tips of his fingers, and the crack seemed to move, as if breathing under his hand. Arthur told me about this mirror, said it was cursed. The wind blew with force. The living room window slammed open, making the curtains thrash like ghosts. Caleb spun toward me, eyes wide. You can't stay here, he said. This house holds secrets that don't belong to you. Enough, I shouted. I don't know who you are or what you want, but get out. He took a step back, as if I had slapped him. Then he nodded. You're right, but remember this. Truths that are kept silent end up returning. And he left, without looking back. I locked the door immediately. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I went to the window. Caleb was walking through the garden, but as he crossed the gate, he disappeared. Literally. He vanished into thin air. That night, the wind didn't stop howling. I sat in front of the mirror, watching my reflection in the dim light, and just as the clock struck 3 a.m, I saw him. Arthur, standing, behind me, wearing the same shirt he had on the day he died. His lips moved. I couldn't hear him, but I could read them. They said, he isn't lying. I felt a chill run through my body. I spun around, and there was no one. Just the house, the wind, and my trembling reflection. But on the glass, right over my shoulder, a word had been written, as if traced by an invisible finger. Forgive. I didn't sleep that night. The reflection in the mirror stayed in my mind, with that word etched in the glass. Forgive. It was Arthur's handwriting, unmistakable. I spent hours in front of it, waiting for another sign, another word, an answer that didn't come. But the house only gave me silence, a silence that hurt like an open wound. In the morning, I decided to find Caleb. I couldn't let that man disappear without explanations. I went to the address he had left on the card, which, according to him, Arthur gave him before dying. But the surprise was devastating. That address didn't exist. The street numbers ended before it, and the rest was a vacant lot full of weeds. I felt a strange vertigo. It was as if everything I had seen, everything I had heard, was part of a dream. But my heart knew it wasn't. Caleb was real. And Arthur somehow was too. I returned home with the premonition that something was about to happen. And I wasn't wrong. When I walked through the door, Lucas was there, sitting on the sofa, cell phone in hand. His look was hard, vigilant. Where were you, Mom? I went for a walk. I needed air. You shouldn't go out alone. You're not well. His tone was cold, condescending, the same tone Arthur used when he wanted to make me feel small. I am perfectly fine, I replied. Doesn't look like it. You've been talking to yourself for days, seeing things that aren't there. His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit, but what hurt the most was his next sentence. Dad is gone, Mom. It's time you accepted it. And how did you accept it so fast, Lucas? I asked him. He went silent, looked away, and then I saw it. Guilt, a slight shadow, but enough to understand that he knew more than he was saying. I stepped closer. What are you hiding? Nothing. Who is Valerie Cross? His face changed. For the first time in a long time, I saw him scared. Where did you get that name? From your father's papers, from the transfers he made every month. You had no right to go through that. I had the right to know who I shared 40 years of my life with, I said, my voice shaking. Lucas grit his teeth. Valerie isn't what you think. Then tell me. Who is she? His silence was my answer. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I didn't want him to see me cry. On the table sat the recorder Caleb had left. I turned it on, rewound the tape to the end, and there, after Arthur's last message, something else was audible. A second voice, a young voice, Lucas's voice. Relax, Dad. Nobody is going to know. Mom doesn't need to find out. I told you I'd fix it. If you cooperate, everything will be fine. My hands started to tremble. I turned off the recorder. The air turned heavy. The words mixed in my head like knives. Lucas, my own son. What had he done? There comes a moment when a mother has to choose between the child she raised and the monster he's become. I sat there on the edge of the bed, feeling the umbilical cord finally, painfully snap. That night I dreamed of Arthur again, but this time he wasn't in the hallway or behind the mirror. He was sitting on the sofa looking at me with sadness. Forgive him, he told me. Who? I asked. Lucas. Why would I? Because he didn't know the whole truth. I woke up crying, and on the nightstand there was something that hadn't been there before. A photo. Arthur, me, and a younger woman with dark hair. Valerie Cross. And in her arms, a small boy. A boy with Arthur's eyes. My heart stopped. The boy wasn't Lucas, it was Caleb. Everything started to fit. The calls, the warning, the message. Caleb wasn't a stranger. He was my husband's illegitimate son, the one Arthur had tried to hide his entire life. And Lucas? Lucas knew. He knew about his existence. He knew about the inheritance. And he had done the impossible to keep him away. I went to the den and took out the metal box. This time I opened it without fear. Inside were documents, letters, and a will. Arthur's will, dated just 2 weeks before his death. I leave half of my assets to my wife, Diane Keegan, and the other half to my son, Caleb Cross. I felt my heart break, not just from the betrayal, but from the shame of having lived so many years next to a stranger. My husband had another family, another son, another life, and I, unknowingly, raised the man who wanted to erase all evidence of that truth. I went to the window. Outside, the wind whipped the branches with fury. The sky was dark, as if the whole world was preparing for a storm. Suddenly I saw something, a figure standing in the rain. It was Caleb, soaked, motionless, looking toward the house. I ran down. I opened the door and shouted his name. He looked up, eyes full of tears. You know now, don't you? He asked. Yes. Then you also know who killed him. My voice broke. What are you saying? Caleb took a step toward me. Your husband didn't die by chance, Mrs. Keegan. Are you insinuating that Lucas... I'm not insinuating. I saw it. His face was pale, sincere, almost terrified. I went to the house that night, he continued. Dad had called me. He said he would finally introduce me officially, but when I arrived, Lucas was there. They were arguing, and then I heard the thud. I brought my hands to my chest. I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you say anything before? I asked, weeping. Because if I talked, they would have blamed me. Nobody would have believed the secret son. We stood in silence. The rain fell hard and lightning illuminated his face. The resemblance to Arthur was terrifying. It was like having him in front of me once more. Lucas can't know we spoke, Caleb said. What do you plan to do? What Dad didn't have time to do. Tell the truth. And looking at him, I understood that the story was just beginning. I had spent my whole life believing truth was a luxury, when in reality it was a debt. And I was ready to pay it, no matter the price. Never had the silence of my house been so loud. After what Caleb told me, every corner seemed to whisper names, secrets, and guilt. It was hard to breathe. The rain had ceased, but the air remained impregnated with the storm, as if the world hadn't finished speaking yet. The metal box was still on the table, open, waiting for me. Inside, besides the will, was something else. An envelope sealed with red wax. The seal had the initials A.K. Arthur Keegan. My hands shook as I broke the wax. Inside, I found several folded sheets, a letter, and a USB drive. The letter was dated just 3 days before his death. Diane, if you're reading this, it means the inevitable has happened. Trust no one, not even Lucas. For years, I kept a secret I thought I could control, but now it is too late. Caleb is innocent. It was my mistake hiding him, and if things go wrong, look in the file named Veritas. There you will know who wanted to silence me. My eyes blurred, the letters mixed with tears, but I understood enough to know that the danger was still here. Trust no one, not even Lucas. That phrase was like an echo from the beyond. I put the letter away and turned on the old computer in the den. The screen flickered. I inserted the drive. A single file appeared. Veritas.mp4. My heart beat with such force I could barely hear the sound of the video. The image showed Arthur's study, recorded in secret. He was sitting at the desk, talking to someone off camera. And that voice, I recognized that voice instantly. It was Lucas. You don't have to do this, Dad. I have the right to leave him what is his. To a bastard, it's going to ruin us. It's not his fault, Lucas. The mistake was mine. Then you pay for it. But don't expect me to live on leftovers. The thud came after. A dry, brutal sound. Arthur clutched his hands to his chest, fell backward. The camera moved, but not enough to hide my son's face. His expression was one of horror, and then of coldness. He stood there. He watched. He did nothing. I closed the video, trembling. My soul burned. Lucas had let his father die. And he had lived with me all these months, as if nothing happened. I stayed there, in front of the black screen, without tears. The pain wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something darker, sharper. A part of me died, but another awoke. A part that had been asleep for years. Suddenly, I heard steps in the hallway. They weren't imaginary. They were approaching, slow, constant. I opened the desk drawer. There was Arthur's old revolver, kept there for decades. I didn't remember the last time I had touched it, but that night, I felt I had to. The door to the study opened. Lucas was there, his gaze hard, as if he already knew everything. What are you doing, Mom? Seeing the truth, I said, voice low. He tensed. What truth? Your father's. What you did. His face transformed. There was no more pretense, only rage. Where is the drive? He asked. Where it should be. You have no idea what you're doing. He took a step toward me, and then I pointed the gun at him. He stopped. You're going to shoot your own son? He said with a bitter smile. No, I replied. I just want you to tell me why. His voice cracked, but not from remorse, because he took everything from me. He made me feel invisible. He always talked about you, about his perfect wife, about the ideal family. And meanwhile, he had another son, another life. Do you know what it is to grow up knowing your father loved someone you didn't even know more than you? His words were blades, but the guilt didn't redeem him. And you thought letting him die would make you free? I asked. I thought erasing him meant I could start over. The air turned heavy. The clock struck 3. The same instant Arthur died. And suddenly the lights flickered. The hallway mirror creaked again. That crack expanded. Lucas turned his head, confused. What was that? But I already knew. It wasn't the mirror breaking. It was him. It was his soul. And the justice Arthur had left pending was on its way. A freezing gust swept through the house. The lamp died. In the darkness, a voice filled the air. It didn't come from me. It didn't come from Lucas. Don't run, son. Lucas stumbled back, pale. Did you hear that? He whispered. I just nodded. The shadows in the hallway moved on their own, outlining a tall figure, broad shoulders, a figure we both knew too well. Lucas screamed. I didn't move. The figure stopped in front of him, and his voice boomed, deep, serene, undeniably real. I gave you my name. And you gave me my death. Lucas fell to his knees. I watched him, tearless. It wasn't cruelty. It was destiny. The air lit up for a second, and then silence. When I turned on the light, Lucas wasn't there anymore. Just the open box on the table. Inside, Arthur's letter, and at the end of it, a line I hadn't read before. When the truth is revealed, let the past collect its debt, and then live. I went out to the garden at dawn. The sky was clean, the wind warm. I felt peace for the first time in weeks. The house, though still broken, seemed lighter. I sat under the rose bush Arthur planted the day we became a family. Then I knew. He hadn't left completely. He was just waiting for me to wake up too. The sunrise was different. The wind no longer whistled with threat, but with calm. The sun filtered through the curtains, and for the first time in weeks, the house didn't smell of fear. It smelled of endings and beginnings. I spent hours in the garden, looking at the flowers Arthur had planted. Every petal seemed to remind me of something about him. His laugh, his silences, his guilt, and also his warning. Don't trust Lucas. He was right, as always. But what Arthur never imagined was that the price of that truth would fall on me. Mid-morning, the police arrived. Detective Miller, a sturdy man with a tired face, introduced himself at the door with a formal tone. Mrs. Keegan, we're here regarding the report you filed last night. Yes, I replied, voice dull. My son disappeared. He nodded, looking at me cautiously. Can we come in? Of course. I led him to the den. The metal box was still on the table, along with the letter and the will. I told him everything, or almost everything. I didn't mention the voice, nor the mirror, nor the figure that took Lucas. How do you explain something even I didn't understand? Miller listened attentively, taking notes. Do you have proof of what you're claiming? He asked. I pulled out the USB drive. Everything is here. Have you watched it all? Yes. Then you understand this changes everything. I nodded, and while he reviewed the content, his expression went from skepticism to horror. He stopped the video before the end. My God. Then he looked at me. Your son is the prime suspect. I didn't have the strength to answer. I knew he was, but hearing it from a stranger was like reopening the wound. Miller put the drive in a sealed bag and stood up. We're going to open a formal investigation. If we find his whereabouts, we'll contact you immediately. Detective, I said before he left, if you don't find him, don't look too hard. He looked at me in silence. He knew there was something else, but he didn't ask. Sometimes men who have seen too much death recognize when a story doesn't need an explanation. When they left, the silence returned, but different. Denser, more conscious. I walked through the house, observing the traces of a life that no longer existed. Arthur's books, Lucas's old toys, the family portraits where we all smiled without knowing we were lying. In one of them, behind the glass, I saw something that wasn't there before. A fine line, almost invisible, like a crack. I touched the glass. It was cold. And on the other side, I would swear I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. Caleb returned at dusk. His face was gaunt, but his gaze was firm. The police know, he said. I nodded. It was inevitable. Did you tell them everything? Only what they could understand. We stood in silence a moment. He approached and left a folder on the table. This was in my mother's office, he said. I think you should see it. I opened it carefully. They were old letters addressed to Arthur, signed by Valerie Cross. Every word was a confession, a plea, a wound. I loved you knowing I shouldn't. Our son grew up asking for you. Don't blame him for hating you, Arthur. Blame your cowardice. My heart clenched. Caleb watched in silence, tearless, but eyes wet. Why show me this? I asked. Because I want you to know I don't hold a grudge. Not against him. Not against you. Me neither, I replied, voice trembling. But there is something I must do. I went to the desk and took out Arthur's final letter. The last line he had added seemed written for this moment. When the truth is revealed, let the past collect its debt, and then live. I handed the letter to Caleb. This house is yours too. He shook his head. No. Yes, it's what your father wanted. I don't want anything, Diane. Just peace. We stood there, in front of the hallway mirror, the same one that had witnessed the anger, the voices, and the death. Its surface now seemed tranquil. Caleb observed it attentively. Why do you keep it? Because it reminds me that even broken things can reflect the truth. He smiled sadly. Dad said something similar. What did he say? Don't fear the reflection, but what hides behind it. His words made me shudder. We stood in silence, contemplating the glass. For a moment, I thought I saw a diffuse silhouette, a figure walking away into the shadows, and I felt that, finally, Arthur was resting. Caleb left that night. I didn't know where, but he left a note under the door. Thank you for not hating me. If I ever return, it will be to make sure you are living, like he wanted C. I stood with that letter in my hands. The clock struck midnight, and then, for the first time, the mirror reflected something different. My face in peace. I had lost my husband, my son, and the life I knew, but somehow, I had gained something bigger. The truth. The next morning, Detective Miller returned. He looked serious. We found something, he said. My heart stopped. Lucas? No. He pulled out a photograph. It was the metal box, open, empty. It was in the river, he continued, and inside, there was just one word engraved on the bottom. Which one? I asked, barely whispering. Miller looked me in the eyes. Forgive. I felt the air fill with light. I smiled. For the first time, without guilt, the past had collected its debt, and silence, finally, had a fair price. Sometimes, when the wind blows from the north, my house smells like coffee and old paper again. It's a scent that tells me I'm not truly alone. I've learned to live with my ghosts, literally, because the truth doesn't just set you free, it changes you. Lucas is still gone, and I've made my peace with the fact that some debts are paid in shadows. But every now and then, I walk past that mirror in the hallway and smile at the crack that stopped halfway down the glass. We both survived the storm, Arthur and I, and in the end, that has to be enough.